One final blind date. The lonely billionaire CEO thought it was a joke, until the single mom walked in and stole his heart. Grayson Wilde had everything money could buy, except someone to come home to. At 32, he was the CEO of an international luxury hotel chain, with a net worth high enough to land him on magazine covers and economic panels. But after years of failed dates and headline-hunting women, Grayson had built walls no diamond ring could reach. He had not always been this closed off. But after a broken engagement and betrayal that made headlines, something in him shut down. Romance became a negotiation. Every blind date arranged by his well-meaning best friend Owen felt like a business pitch, with worse coffee and tighter dresses. Grayson could recite the checklist of every woman Owen had introduced him to: bold lipstick, curated social media bios, conversations orbiting yachts, brand deals, and investment talk. And they all ended with him footing the bill and feeling emptier than before. So when Owen called that morning with, "This is the one, just one last time, Gray," he sighed. "Fine, one last time. But if she brings up her candle line or asks me to fund a podcast, I'm walking." That evening, Grayson arrived at Le Méridien, a restaurant he technically owned but rarely visited. The hostess recognized him and led him to a private booth set with lilies and soft candlelight. He arrived 10 minutes early, not because he cared, but to remind himself he didn't. Adjusting the cuffs of his tailored navy suit, he muttered under his breath, "Red dress, platform heels, and a pitch deck." A waiter passed by. "Your guest will be arriving shortly, Mr. Wilde." Grayson gave a polite nod and looked around the room. She's probably late for dramatic effect, he thought. Owen's definitely watching this and laughing his head off. But when the door opened, the woman who stepped inside did not match any pattern. She was different. She wore a long gray wool coat, slightly worn at the cuffs. Her blonde hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, a few strands loose around her face. No red lips, no designer handbag. Just a canvas tote on one shoulder. And beside her, a tiny girl in a pink dress and boots, clutching a ragged stuffed bear. Grayson blinked. He actually blinked. Twice. "A single mom?" he whispered. "Seriously, Owen?" Madeline spotted him and made her way over with a nervous smile. "Hi, I'm Madeline. I'm so sorry I had to bring my daughter. My babysitter canceled last minute. I understand if this is not what you expected." Her voice was genuine. She wasn't performing. She didn't seem to know, or care, that he was Grayson Wilde. Grayson opened his mouth, unsure what to say. But before he could decide whether to leave or laugh, the little girl dropped her stuffed bear onto the floor. Without hesitation, Madeline knelt down, pulled tissues from her coat pocket, and carefully wiped the bear's face and paws. She whispered, "Mr. Bear deserves to be clean before dinner, right?" Grayson stared. It was not the fall of the bear that froze him. It was the way she handled it. Calm, kind, no apology, no embarrassment. He had watched people grovel for his attention, watched women fake entire personalities to impress him. But this was real. By the time Madeline stood back up, brushing off her knees with a sheepish glance, he had already made up his mind. "Well," Grayson said, gesturing to the chair across from him, "if Mr. Bear's staying for dinner, I suppose I should too." Madeline laughed, softly. "Thank you." A high chair was brought for Zoe. She sat between them, eating warm breadsticks, chatting about cartoons and cookies. Madeline apologized repeatedly for the disruption, but Grayson waved her off. They talked, not about yachts or stocks, but about libraries, favorite books, weird part-time jobs, and childhood messes. Madeline told him she worked at the local library. She never asked what he did. And for once, he didn't offer. For the first time in years, Grayson felt like himself. Just a man at dinner with someone who didn't want anything from him but his time. When the check came, Madeline reached for her purse. Grayson stopped her gently. "I invited Mr. Bear," he said. "This one's on me." As they stepped outside into the cool night air, Madeline buttoned Zoe's coat as she yawned. "Thank you," she said again, her voice quiet. For not walking out. Grayson smiled. Thank you, for showing up. They parted on the sidewalk. No numbers exchanged, no promises made. But something lingered. Not just curiosity, not just chemistry. Hope. Hope that maybe this wasn't a joke. Maybe this was the start of something real. Grayson Wilde wasn't used to replaying a single evening in his mind. He'd had dates before, dozens of them. Glamorous, expensive, curated nights that all blurred together by the end. But this one stuck. It had been days since the dinner with Madeline and her daughter Zoe, and still, her voice echoed in his mind. Not for what she said, but for how it made him feel. Seen. Not judged. Not chased. Just seen. He tried to shake it off. He buried himself in meetings, contracts, and late-night calls with Tokyo. But even as he reviewed billion-dollar proposals, he found himself wondering if Miss Bear was still clean, or whether Zoe had finished the story about the purple dragon and the lemonade stand. He hated how often he smiled at the thought. "Are you seriously still thinking about her?" Owen asked one evening, slouching across from him in Grayson's penthouse, sipping whiskey like he owned the place. "No," Grayson lied. "You are," Owen smirked. "It's written all over your face. Admit it, you liked her." Grayson rolled his eyes. "I barely know her. It was one dinner. And yet, here you are, still talking about a pink-dressed toddler and her librarian mom like they're the plot twist of the year. I'm not talking about them. You're thinking about them. That counts." Grayson didn't respond, because Owen was right. She had gotten under his skin, and not because she tried to. She wasn't even trying to be charming. That's what made it worse. She didn't wear heels. She didn't know who he was. She didn't try to impress. And somehow, that made her unforgettable. He found her 3 days later. It wasn't hard. She had mentioned working at the local library. So Grayson, dressed in jeans and a sweater instead of his usual suit, walked through the glass doors of the old brick building and stepped into a world of quiet pages and low whispers. He hadn't been in a public library since high school. A part of him wanted to walk away. What if she thought he was stalking her? What if she didn't want to see him again? But curiosity outweighed hesitation. He picked up a random paperback from a shelf and wandered until he found her, seated at the circulation desk, sorting through a stack of returned children's books. Her blonde ponytail was tied with a fabric scrunchie. Her cheeks were slightly pink from the cold, and when she looked up, her eyes widened in surprise. "Grayson?" she asked, blinking. "Hi." He smiled, awkward but genuine. "Hey, I came looking for something to read." Madeline tilted her head, amused. "Really?" He held up the book in his hand, a children's chapter book titled The Magic Squirrel and the Secret Key. He grimaced. "Clearly, I need help." She laughed. It was soft and warm, like cinnamon on toast. "Well, you came to the right place," she said, standing and walking around the desk. "We just got a donation of some new fiction. What do you usually like?" "I was hoping you'd tell me." And so she did. For the next 20 minutes, they wandered the shelves. She showed him her favorite authors. He asked too many questions. She teased him for not knowing who Colleen Hoover was. He pretended to be offended. They didn't talk about the date, not directly, but the air between them felt different, comfortable, open. "So," she said at one point, running her fingers over a hardcover spine, "what do you do again? I realized I never asked." Grayson hesitated, then offered her the same version he had told others before. "I write. Mostly travel essays, sometimes fiction." She looked impressed. "That explains the questions about the magic squirrel." He grinned. "I like a good plot twist." When he finally checked out the book, she recommended A Man Called Ove. She smiled as she scanned it. "This one's about a grumpy guy with a good heart. I think you'll relate." Grayson took the book, touched by the playful jab. "I'll bring it back." "I'll be here," she said, not missing a beat. And just like that, the door opened again. Not just the glass door of the library, but something quieter, deeper. He wasn't sure what this was, but he wanted to find out. It was a Thursday afternoon when the call came. Madeline had just clocked in at the library when her manager approached. "Can you cover the evening shift today? Emma's out sick, and we're short-staffed." She hesitated. "I have Zoe with me. I was just going to drop her off with my neighbor for a few hours." "They're really counting on you," her manager said. Madeline checked the time. Just enough to walk Zoe across the block to her sitter's place. But when they arrived, no one answered. She called. No reply. Her stomach tightened. 15 minutes until her shift started. Zoe tugged her hand. "Mommy, I'm hungry." Madeline closed her eyes. Then, a voice from behind. "Everything okay?" She turned. Grayson stood across the street, takeaway coffee in hand, hair tousled by the wind. She blinked. "Grayson, what are you doing here?" He lifted his cup. "I needed more books, and maybe a scone." Her laugh came out shaky. "Of course." Zoe peeked from behind her coat. "That's the man who helped Mr. Bear." Grayson smiled. "Hi, Zoe." Madeline crouched, thinking fast. "You wouldn't happen to be free for the next 30 minutes? He raised a brow. "Why?" "My sitter's out. I need to run back to the library. Just for a bit. I know it's a huge ask." "I'll watch her," he said. Madeline blinked. "You're sure?" "We'll hang out, read some stories. Maybe split a croissant." "She can be shy. I'm good with shy." Madeline exhaled. "Okay, thank you." "You don't owe me anything," he added. "Go do your job. We've got this." She gave Zoe a hug and hurried away, heart still pounding. Grayson turned to Zoe. "Miss Zoe, ever tried the almond croissants at Baxter's?" She tilted her head. "What's a croissant?" He grinned. "Let's find out." Inside the cafe, they sat by the window. Grayson helped her peel the croissant apart, cutting it into bite-sized pieces. Then he knelt and tied her tiny pink shoelaces, double-knotted, precise. "Do you read stories?" she asked. "All the time. What kind do you like?" "Princesses and dragons. But not scary dragons, just sleepy ones." Grayson chuckled. "Let's see what we can find." He pulled a children's book from the cafe's small shelf, The Sleepy Dragon and the Stolen Star, and sat in the corner chair while she curled beside him. His voice softened, pacing the story with ease. Zoe giggled, then gasped, then whispered along with him. Neither noticed the college student at the next table, quietly filming a 30-second clip on her phone. Later that evening, while Madeline reshelved books, her coworker Melanie waved her phone. "Madeline, you have to see this." On screen, Grayson, reading to a little blonde girl by the window. The caption, "This man has billionaire energy and golden retriever heart." Thousands of views. Madeline's stomach flipped. She recognized the chair, the croissant, him. "Where did you find that?" "It's all over social. No one knows who he is. But the way he tied her shoes and fed her like a baby bird," I cried. Madeline didn't know whether to laugh or panic. When she met Grayson later that evening to pick up Zoe, she cleared her throat. "So, you might be going viral." He blinked. "Excuse me?" She showed him the video. He watched it, then chuckled. "I didn't sign a media release." "You're reading about dragons, in a bakery, to a 3-year-old. She asked about sleepy dragons. You tied her shoes." "They were untied," he said, as if that explained everything. Madeline studied him, this tall, quiet man who never bragged, never asked for anything in return, who just showed up. "You're good with her," she said softly. "I like her," he said, "and I like spending time with you." Her cheeks flushed. She reached for Zoe's hand. "We should get home." Grayson nodded. "Can I walk you?" She smiled. "I'd like that." As they stepped into the December chill, Madeline felt something warm stir in her chest. Something unexpected. Something beginning. The lake shimmered under the soft glow of the streetlights. The water still, except for the occasional ripple stirred by a breeze. Winter hadn't fully settled in yet, but the air held a bite, enough to make Madeline tug her coat tighter as she walked beside Grayson. It was quiet out, peaceful. Grayson had texted her earlier that day, asking if she wanted to take a walk. Just a walk, he'd said, nothing fancy. And so here they were, no restaurant, no polished surfaces, just gravel paths and the soft crunch of leaves underfoot. Madeline glanced sideways at him. He looked more relaxed than usual, hands in his coat pockets, gaze distant but thoughtful. "You're quieter tonight," she said gently. He gave a small smile, then let out a breath like he'd been holding it for hours. "I used to come here a lot," he said, "especially after things fell apart." Madeline tilted her head. "Things?" He hesitated. Then, for the first time, he didn't redirect the conversation, didn't joke or change the subject. "I was engaged once," he said, voice low. 5 years ago." She blinked. "You were?" He nodded. "Her name was Tessa. We'd been together for 3 years. I thought she was it." Madeline didn't speak, sensing he wasn't done. "She left 2 weeks before the wedding. Told me she'd fallen in love with someone else. One of my business partners, actually." Madeline winced. "I'm so sorry." "I wasn't angry," he continued. "At least not right away. I was numb, humiliated, sure, but mostly I just felt like a fool, like I'd misread everything." Silence hung between them for a moment, broken only by the soft lapping of the lake. "And after that," he said, "I stopped trying. Dating felt like a game I didn't know the rules to anymore. Every woman I met seemed more interested in my net worth than my words. Eventually, I stopped showing up." Madeline slowed her steps. "I didn't expect you to say that." "I didn't expect to say it," he admitted. They reached a bench and sat down, side by side, the night wrapping around them. Madeline tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. "You're not the only one who's been let down." Grayson turned slightly toward her. "I was 19 when I met Zoe's father," she said. "He was older, smart, charming. Told me everything I wanted to hear." She paused, her hands folded in her lap. "When I told him I was pregnant, he said I ruined his life, that he wasn't ready for this kind of responsibility. He left a week later, changed his number, moved across the country." Grayson's jaw tensed. "I was terrified," Madeline continued. "I had no money, no college degree, no support. Just a part-time job, and this tiny apartment that smelled like paint thinner." He looked at her, not with pity, but something deeper, respect. "And yet," she said, her voice softer now, "here I am, with a daughter who thinks bedtime stories are the greatest luxury on earth." Grayson let out a quiet laugh. "She's incredible." "She saved me," Madeline whispered. "In every way a person can be saved." For a while, neither of them said anything. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the trees. A duck splashed near the edge of the water. When Madeline finally looked at him, his eyes were already on her. "I don't know what this is," she said, "but talking to you, it feels like I can breathe again." Grayson's reply was almost a whisper. "Yeah, me too." They sat there, two strangers from worlds that didn't usually meet, a single mom who shelved books for a living, and a man who sat atop boardrooms and balance sheets. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Pain had leveled the field between them, and in the raw honesty of shared wounds, something quietly beautiful had started to grow. Something that felt a lot like the beginning of hope. It started with background noise. The TV in the staff lounge of the library was always on, usually tuned to the local news or some nature channel no one paid attention to. Madeline had just returned from reshelving a cart of children's books, her fingers still dusted with glitter from storytime crafts. She walked in to grab her water bottle, half listening, half daydreaming. "Wild Hotels is expected to expand another 10% this quarter," the anchor said. And with Grayson Wild returning from his brief hiatus, investors are hopeful about renewed leadership. She froze. The screen behind the anchor lit up with a clip, Grayson stepping out of a black SUV, surrounded by flashing cameras. He waved briefly, suited and polished, then disappeared behind glass doors. Madeline's blood ran cold. She blinked, and blinked again. It was him. The man who claimed to be a freelance writer. The man who had helped her daughter tie her shoelaces and smiled like he had nothing to prove. The man who took walks by the lake like he was hiding from something. Grayson Wilde. Her legs felt weak. The water bottle slipped from her hand, thudding to the floor. He lied. He had looked her in the eye, again and again, and never once said who he really was, never hinted, never corrected her when she joked that he probably made more in coffee than she did in a week. He had let her believe he was ordinary. She did not answer his texts that night, or the day after. Grayson noticed the shift immediately. One missed reply became 3. A call went straight to voicemail. By the end of the second day, he was standing outside the library, waiting. Madeline stepped out with Zoe in one hand and a cloth tote bag in the other. She stopped when she saw him, her jaw tightening, eyes guarded. "Madeline," he began. "Please, just let me." "You're Grayson Wilde," she interrupted. "CEO of Wilde Hotels. Worth what, $3 billion? Or is it 4 now?" He winced. "I never meant to. You lied to me." Her voice was calm, but each word landed like a strike. "Every time I asked what you did, you gave me some vague story about writing, about bookstores and paperbacks. I trusted you. I didn't do it to manipulate you," he said quickly. I wanted to be seen, not as a headline, not as a walking wallet, just as a man. And so you lied." Her lips pressed into a tight line. "You let me open up to you, about my life, my daughter, everything. And the whole time, you were pretending to be someone else." "I wasn't pretending who I was," Grayson said. "I was just hiding what I had." Madeline laughed, sharp and bitter. "That's a beautiful distinction, Grayson. Really poetic." Zoe looked up, confused by the tension. "Mommy?" she whispered. Madeline crouched and smoothed the girl's hair. "It's okay, sweetie. We're fine." When she rose again, her voice was lower, quieter. "I've been through enough people walking away when they realize I come with a child and no money. You walked in pretending to be poor, like it was a game." "It wasn't a game," Grayson said, his voice breaking. "You were the first person who didn't want anything from me. I didn't want anything because I thought you had nothing to give, except yourself. That was enough." She stepped back, tugging Zoe's hand gently. "Goodbye, Grayson." He opened his mouth but couldn't find words fast enough. She was already walking away. For the first time in years, Grayson Wilde, the man who could negotiate $1-million contracts without flinching, stood on a sidewalk in the cold, completely, utterly speechless, and alone. It had been a quiet week. Madeline had gone into autopilot, wake up, dress Zoe, make breakfast, go to work. Her heart still clenched every time she passed the lake path where they used to walk. She avoided glancing at her phone during breaks, knowing there would be nothing from him. And even if there was, she told herself she wouldn't answer. But Zoe noticed. Of course she did. "Why don't we see Mr. Grayson anymore?" she asked one night while brushing her teeth, her little voice muffled through bubbles of minty foam. Madeline had paused, her hand frozen mid-reach for the towel. "Mr. Grayson's busy, sweetie, grown-up stuff." Zoe looked unconvinced. "But he was our friend." "I know," Madeline whispered, gently toweling off her daughter's chin. "Sometimes friends go away." Zoe blinked, then hugged her mother tightly. "I don't want him to." "Neither do I," Madeline thought. The library's annual Storytime Festival fell on a Saturday, an all-day event with costumed readers, crafts, music, and a small stage where children were invited to share their favorite stories. It was always a hit, drawing families from all over the neighborhood. Madeline helped organize the event, juggling logistics while keeping an eye on Zoe, who wore her favorite pink dress and carried Mr. Bear, now with a stitched-up paw. Despite the crowd and music, Zoe seemed quieter than usual. She stuck close to Madeline's side, clutching her hand tighter than normal. During the afternoon session, a local news channel arrived to record a segment. a host introduced the children's storytelling portion, handing a foam microphone to each brave little reader. Zoe raised her hand. Madeline blinked in surprise. Zoe wasn't usually the spotlight type, but before she could intervene, her daughter had climbed the few small steps to the stage, Mr. Bear tucked under her arm. The host leaned down. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Zoe," she said, gripping the mic in both hands. "What story do you want to share?" Zoe hesitated. Her eyes searched the crowd, then turned back to the microphone. Her voice came out soft but clear. "I don't have a storybook to read, but I want to talk about a person. His name is Mr. Grayson." Madeline's breath caught. The host raised an eyebrow, smiling. "Oh? Is he a storyteller?" Zoe nodded seriously. "Yes, but he doesn't just read stories. He ties shoelaces, and buys cinnamon rolls, and makes my mom laugh. I like his stories, but I like that part better." A few chuckles rippled through the audience. Zoe's voice softened. "I don't know why he disappeared, but Mommy's been sad. She tries not to show it, but I can tell." A lump formed in Madeline's throat. The room grew still. Zoe looked down at her shoes, then back at the crowd, hugging Mr. Bear tighter. "So if Mr. Grayson sees this, I want him to know, Mommy and I miss him. Please don't stay gone forever." Silence. Then soft applause. Not out of politeness, but something deeper. Touched, moved. Madeline couldn't stop the tear that slipped down her cheek. She covered her mouth, trying to steady herself as Zoe stepped down from the stage and walked straight into her arms. "You didn't have to say that, baby," Madeline whispered into her hair, voice trembling. "But it's true," Zoe said, muffled against her shoulder. "You smiled more when he was here." 2 hours later, Grayson stood in his office, phone in hand. The video had been forwarded by a junior marketing employee who happened to be at the event with her niece. The caption read simply, "You might want to see this." He had watched it 3 times. By the 4th, he wasn't even pretending he wasn't crying. When Zoe's little voice said, "Please don't stay gone forever," something inside him broke open, and something else snapped back into place. He grabbed his coat. It was time. It was snowing again. Large, soft flakes drifted from a heavy gray sky, covering the sidewalk and bare trees outside the small public library. The kind of snow that made everything quiet, as if the world was waiting. Grayson stood at the entrance, snow clinging to his black coat. In his gloved hands, he held a small white bakery box tied with red string. Apple crumble muffins, the kind Madeline once mentioned loving on a walk. His heart pounded harder than it ever did before a board meeting. This wasn't business. This was Madeline. Zoe. A chance he was terrified to lose. He stepped inside. The warmth of the library wrapped around him, soft light, muffled voices, the rustle of pages. In the reading nook, a little girl in a pink dress looked up. Zoe's eyes lit up. "Mommy, it's Mr. Grayson." Madeline appeared from an aisle, a stack of books in her arms. She froze at the sight of him. He walked to the front desk, placing the box down gently. On top was a small, folded note. She didn't reach for it. Her eyes stayed on him. "I wasn't honest," he began, his voice low but steady. "I told myself it was harmless, just wanting to be seen without the name, but I should have trusted you." Still, she said nothing. He nodded at the box. "Open it." Madeline untied the string and lifted the lid. The scent of cinnamon and apples drifted up. Her breath caught. She unfolded the note, fingers trembling slightly. "I may not be perfect, but if you'll let me, I'll spend the rest of my life learning how to be the kind of man who's worthy of you, and Zoe." Her eyes shimmered, not with anger. Something else. Something softer. "I thought you just disappeared," she whispered. "That it didn't mean anything to you." "It meant everything," he said. "But I thought I'd lost you, and maybe I was afraid to find out for sure." Zoe wandered between them, holding Mr. Bear by one arm. She looked from her mother to Grayson. "Mommy?" she asked, tilting her head. "Can he stay for dinner this time?" Madeline laughed, a quiet, shaky sound that cracked open the stillness. She looked down at her daughter, then up at Grayson, and nodded. Grayson stepped forward slowly, not trusting the moment. But when she didn't move away, he wrapped them both in his arms. Madeline leaned into his chest. Zoe giggled, trapped between them but clutching his coat tightly. Outside, snow continued to fall. Inside the library, warmth returned, quiet and real. No spotlight, no diamonds, no perfect words. Just a man, a woman, and a little girl who still believed in bedtime stories and second chances. 1 year later, the little corner shop on Maple and 6th had become a neighborhood favorite. Nestled between a bakery and a florist, the Story Nook stood out with its cheerful window boxes, hand-painted sign, and a chalkboard that read, "Today's reading, dragons, cupcakes, and brave little girls." Inside, the scent of old pages and apple cinnamon candles welcomed visitors with warmth. Behind the counter, Madeline tied her apron. Her blonde hair was twisted up as always, with a few strands escaping to frame her face. In the far corner, the shop's namesake nook waited. Bean bags, bright bookshelves, and a hand-painted tree mural that stretched toward the ceiling. She had dreamed of this place. Now it was hers. Grayson had helped her build it, quietly, generously, never asking for credit. He chose shelves, assembled furniture, and even carved the miniature reading bench himself. But his name wasn't on the lease. "Let it be yours," he had said that night by the fire, handing her the check. "I'm just investing in something worth believing in." They lived in a modest house 20 minutes outside the city. A white-trimmed cottage with a wraparound porch and a small garden where Zoe held tea parties with stuffed animals. Grayson still ran his global hotel empire, but he was home by 5 p.m. every evening, no exceptions. That morning, their kitchen had smelled like toasted muffins and jam. Zoe, now 4, sat at the table in a pink dress, her signature look these days, coloring as she hummed. Today's drawing showed a caped figure carrying a princess in one arm and a teddy bear in the other. Madeline bent down, kissed her forehead and whispered, "Mr. Bear's ears are perfect." Now, just outside the shop, Grayson stood under the awning with 2 takeaway coffees. Through the window, he watched Madeline help a child pick out a book. She had become a beloved face in the community, warm, patient, trusted. He still felt lucky every time he looked at her. Suddenly, the front door burst open. Zoe dashed outside, pink dress twirling, half a muffin in one hand and her drawing in the other. Her voice rang down the street. "My daddy is the man who reads bedtime stories better than anyone." Passers-by chuckled. A cyclist rang their bell. Grayson crouched down, laughing. "Oh yeah?" he said. "Better than the guy with the puppets on YouTube?" "Way better," Zoe replied seriously. She handed him the picture. "This is you, saving Mommy and me, again." Madeline appeared at the doorway, already smiling. Grayson stood and walked to her, the drawing still in his hand. Zoe ran back into the shop, her laughter trailing behind her. He reached Madeline, paused, and wrapped one arm around her waist. Behind them, the wind rustled the leaves. The world moved on. But in that moment, everything slowed. Grayson leaned in, voice low, just for her. "I thought it was just one last blind date." Madeline tilted her head toward him, eyes bright with warmth. "I never knew it would lead me home." If this story stirred something in your heart, a smile, a tear, or maybe a quiet reminder that love shows up when we least expect it, don't forget to hit that hype button and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories. We've got more stories just like this, full of warmth, quiet strength, and the kind of love that heals. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay kind, stay curious, and stay tuned for the next chapter.